Whenever I open LinkedIn or look at business news, the headline is always the same. It's always growth. How to 10x your revenue, how to scale overnight, how to acquire 1 million users in a week. It feels like we are collectively obsessed with the idea of more. But looking at the statistics, most businesses that try to scale that aggressively, they just crash and burn. Why is that?
It's the classic Icarus problem, isn't it? Everyone wants to fly close to the sun, but nobody checks if their wings are made of wax. The obsession with growth is actually one of the biggest killers of legitimate business potential. We confuse swelling with growing. Swelling is just getting bigger. Growing implies getting stronger. And those are two very different physiological states for a company.
That's a fantastic distinction, swelling versus growing. So, if we strip away the hype, what does actual, sustainable growth look like? Because obviously, a business can't stay stagnant, or it dies. So there has to be a middle ground between stagnation and reckless expansion.
Exactly. And it usually starts with a counterintuitive strategy, narrowing your focus. When most founders want to grow, their instinct is to widen the net. They think, I need to sell to everyone. They launch 3 new product lines, they enter 2 new markets, and they dilute their value proposition. The most proven strategy for initial growth is actually radical specificity. You have to be the absolute best solution for a very specific problem for a very specific person.
So, niche down to scale up? It sounds risky though. It feels like you're leaving money on the table if you ignore 90% of the market to focus on that 10%.
It feels that way, sure, but think of it like a laser versus a flashlight. A flashlight illuminates a wide area but has no cutting power. A laser focuses all that energy on a single point and can cut through steel. If you try to be everything to everyone, you become a commodity. And commodities compete on price, which is a race to the bottom. But if you dominate a niche, you compete on value. Once you own that niche, then you expand. That's the strategic discipline most leaders lack.
Okay, so let's say we've nailed that. We have the laser focus. The next logical step for most people is marketing, pouring gasoline on the fire. Is that where the focus should be?
This is the second trap. Everyone is obsessed with customer acquisition. It's the sexy metric. It's what you put on a pitch deck. But the real engine of growth isn't acquisition, it's retention. I like to call it the leaky bucket theory. You can turn the hose on full blast, spend millions on ads, influencers, SEO, but if your bucket has holes in the bottom, you aren't growing. You're just processing people.
Processing people. That's a grim way to put it, but it's accurate. I've seen companies that have massive sales numbers, but their churn rate is so high that they are technically dying while looking like they are booming.
Precisely. And here is the financial reality. Acquiring a new customer costs anywhere from 5 to 25 times more than retaining an existing one. If you shift your strategy from how do I get new people to how do I make my current customers so successful that they never leave, 2 things happen. 1, your margins improve immediately. 2, your customers become your marketing department.
Word of mouth.
Better than word of mouth. Advocacy. There is a difference between a customer who likes your product and a customer who relies on it. If you focus on customer success, truly solving their problem, they do the selling for you. And that growth is organic, free, and exponential. But it's hard to do because it requires patience. It's not a quick hack.
It requires empathy too. You actually have to care about the user's outcome, not just the transaction. But let's shift gears a bit. We've talked about market focus and retention. What about the internal side? You can't scale a business if the machine itself, the team, the operations is broken.
Oh, absolutely. This is where process comes in. And I know process is the most boring word in the English language. Nobody starts a business because they love standard operating procedures, but you cannot scale chaos. If your business relies on individual heroism, the founder staying up until 2 a.m. to fix things, or that one superstar employee who knows how everything works, you are not scalable. You are fragile.
I've felt that. The founder's trap. You become the bottleneck because you think nobody can do it as well as you. So, the strategy here is, what? Automate everything?
Not automate, but systematize. There's a difference. You need to build a playbook. If you were hit by a bus tomorrow, would the business continue to grow or would it halt? If it halts, you don't own a business. You own a job. The strategy is to document the how of your business so that you can hire ordinary people to produce extraordinary results. It's about building a machine that runs without you.
That's a tough ego check for a lot of leaders. We like to feel indispensable. But you're saying that true growth requires the leader to essentially design themselves out of the daily operations.
100%. The role of the leader shifts from player to coach and eventually to architect. You are designing the culture and the systems. Speaking of culture, that's another huge growth lever that gets ignored. As you grow, culture gets diluted. It's entropy. If you have 5 people in a room, culture is easy. It's just the vibe of the room. If you have 500 people, or 5,000, and you haven't codified your values, your culture will become whatever the loudest or most toxic person in the room decides it is.
And a toxic culture destroys speed. I've seen it happen. Politics start to creep in, silos form, and suddenly it takes 3 weeks to make a decision that used to take 3 minutes.
Exactly. Speed is the ultimate competitive advantage, but bureaucracy is the enemy of speed. So, a key growth strategy is actually fighting complexity. As you get bigger, you have to actively fight to keep things simple. You have to empower people to make decisions at the edges, rather than funneling everything to the top. It's about trust. High-trust organizations grow faster because they move faster.
I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier about data. We live in a world where we have more data than ever before. Is the secret to growth just following the data? Or is there still room for intuition?
That is the multi-million-dollar question. Look, data is essential. It tells you where you are and where you've been. It's the dashboard of the car. But data cannot see around corners. Data is historical. If you only do what the data tells you, you will optimize your way to mediocrity. You'll make small, incremental improvements, a 1% better conversion rate here, a slightly better margin there. That's fine. But explosive growth? Game-changing growth? That comes from insight. That comes from intuition.
So, the data tells you what is happening, but intuition tells you why and what could be.
Yes. Think about the iPhone. There was no data saying people wanted to get rid of physical keyboards on their BlackBerries. The data said people loved keyboards. If Apple had been purely data-driven, they would have made a better BlackBerry. Intuition. Understanding human desire before the humans even articulate it. That's where the magic happens. So, the strategy is use data to optimize, but use intuition to innovate. Don't let the spreadsheet kill the dream.
That's a powerful balance. It seems like the common thread here is discipline. Discipline to say no to the wrong customers. Discipline to fix the leaky bucket before filling it. Discipline to build boring processes. And discipline to trust your gut when the data is murky.
It is. Real growth is boring. It's repetitive. It's about consistency. The hacks and the silver bullets are great for selling books, but they don't build empires. The companies that are still here in 10, 20 years? They are the ones that mastered the fundamentals. They understand that revenue is a byproduct of value. If you chase the revenue, you might catch it for a moment, but you'll lose it. If you chase the value, if you obsess over making the customer's life better, the revenue chases you.
Revenue is a byproduct of value. I think that's the core of it. We get so caught up in the graphs pointing up and to the right that we forget the graph is just a reflection of how much help we're providing to the world.
And there's a societal element to this too. Unchecked growth for the sake of growth. Well, that's the ideology of a cancer cell, isn't it? We need to ask, growth at what cost? Are we burning out our employees? Are we destroying the environment? Are we compromising our ethics? Sustainable growth means growing in a way that strengthens the entire ecosystem around the business, not just the bank account.
That's a heavy but necessary point. It shifts the definition of success from just size to impact and longevity.
It does. And ironically, the businesses that take that responsible long-term view often end up being the biggest ones anyway, because people trust them. And in the digital economy, trust is the ultimate currency. You can't buy it. You have to earn it slowly over time.
So, to recap for our listeners who are trying to navigate this, don't try to boil the ocean, find your niche. Stop pouring water into a leaky bucket, fix your retention, systematize your operations so you're not the bottleneck. And finally, use data as a tool, not a master, while keeping your eyes on the real value you provide.
That's the blueprint. Simple to say, incredibly hard to execute. But that's why it works. If it were easy, everyone would be a unicorn.
It brings us back to that idea of patience. In a world of instant gratification, patience is a competitive advantage.
It is the ultimate superpower. The willingness to plant a tree today that you won't sit under for 10 years. That is what separates the flash-in-the-pan businesses from the legends.
Well, that is certainly something to chew on. It sounds like we all need to take a step back, stop looking at the daily metrics for a second, and ask ourselves if we are building a machine that can actually endure the journey.
Absolutely. Growth isn't a destination, it's a consequence of doing the right things consistently for a long time.
A consequence of doing the right things. I love that. We'll leave it there for today. It's been a fascinating deep dive into what actually moves the needle versus what just makes noise.
Always a pleasure. Let's hope everyone goes out and grows a little smarter, not just faster.
Exactly. Until next time, keep building.